listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
Welcome to another edition of the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm your host, Femi Abebefe. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos as always. And baby, we are tampering, Michael. We are already 1 day into the legal tampering window. We've seen the running back renaissance, running backs flying off of the market. We've seen the NFL guards. What a great day to be an NFL guard. Those guys are getting a lot of money there. And then also we've seen my team sit on the sidelines as of right now, but I guess there's still some time to go. But how we doing? How about our guy Kirk Cousins, legend at the bank as well, man?
It's amazing how those Falcons could get a deal done that quickly for $180 million, right? I love it. Look, I mean, so much has been made about the third-year guarantee. And when you look at the contract, he really only got $10 million guaranteed in the third year, but it's going to take some. It's a time guarantee. He's going to be on the roster. But look, one thing about Kirk Cousins now, he could write a book on how to make money. I think I saw a tweet where he's like $8 million less in career earnings than LeBron James. Think about that. I mean,
something's wrong with that.
and it's remarkable. Look, I think he's a good player, but it just shows you that, when he's going to collect all the money. I don't think in just how this contract came out, I think it was clear that Minnesota got blown out of the water, not by the third-year guarantee, which a lot of people thought could be the driving force, but rather by the total amount of money, $45 million, $90 guaranteed at signing. I mean, it's a rich contract. And look, the Falcons slightly moved their number by the betting odds. Mm-hmm. So you got to give them that. And, he goes to a team. I think the concern is coming off the Achilles. He's not a movement quarterback, so you're worried about that. People seem to think that that's no big deal. Maybe I'm too old school. Remember, most quarterbacks who have died on the vine have been because of an Achilles. But, I think it was Minnesota decided that they've had enough of being in Kirk Cousins' prison, and they got out.
Yeah, they certainly got out. And the terms of the deal are 4 years, $180 million. It's a $50 million at signing, so congratulations to Kirk Cousins coming up on Wednesday. $90 million guaranteed over the next 2 seasons with an additional $10 million guaranteed in 2026 for a total of $100 million in total guarantees.
Now, that 10 is skill guaranteed already. So if he gets hurt or doesn't, it can't pass physical, it's there. But it's really essentially a 3-year contract. I mean, that's really what it is. He's got a void and a potential out in 27, so that's not going to count. And then the other beautiful thing is, he got his no trade clause put in there. I mean, so it's just a beautiful thing for Kurt. I mean, look, give Mike McCartney and his agency a ton of credit, because they're able to. They don't leave a dollar left on the table. There's no stone unturned. I mean, they collect them all. And give them credit. I mean, and Kirk takes all the money, and so he might have to move and relocate. So much for loving it. But I don't really think Minnesota was ever going to be anywhere near this range. I think there was one team in this number, and it was Atlanta all the way.
Yeah, that's the sense that I get as well. And it almost felt like the reports that we're getting out of Minnesota were just like, hey, yeah, we're trying to sign him. We want to sign him. But like, they were never really ever realistically going to get to this number, as they want to kind of turn a new page with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah as the general manager and Kevin O'Connell, the head coach, to try to just start a new era of Minnesota Vikings football. We'll get to them here in just a second. But I want to touch on what you said about Cousins coming off of the Achilles injury, because this was an injury that was suffered late October. And it feels like we just have kind of glossed over it. Like, a lot was made about Rodgers, because Rodgers talked about his Achilles injury a lot. But Cousins, it feels like we all just assume that he's going to be right back to the guy who we saw playing before he got the injury, which was, in my opinion, the best football of his career. Do you think that we're making too much of an assumption? Because the betting market now has the Falcons minus 115 to win the NFC South. They are now the odds-on favorite to win that division.
Well, I mean, look, count the Panthers. I mean, I don't know what the Panthers are doing. I really don't. I mean, the Panthers
the worst roster in the
are
league.
Probably, they continue to go down the path of dysfunction. I mean, we could do a whole, I've always wanted to do a podcast, Femi, about, there's a great podcast called How I Built This. And I've always wanted to do a podcast, like a 7-part series podcast on how I destroyed this. because like you could have done Dan Snyder, how I destroyed Washington. And I think now you could maybe start to do one how that David Tepper's destroyed Carolina. I mean, these moves they're making are just bizarre, just bizarre. And when you add up all the things he's done since turning down Brian Burns for 2 number ones from the Rams and go on, and what he's paid for Bryce Young. So how do you even count them as a formidable opponent? I mean, you can't. I mean, well, they signed 2 big guards to help them. Well, they signed a guard from Miami, and Miami's looking for offensive linemen, and Robert Hunt, and can he stay healthy as much as heavy as he is? Okay. But that takes away from Atlanta. I mean, New Orleans has always had cap trouble. Tampa, they get Mayfield back on a really good contract. I think that was important. You got to give Tampa really credit. They got a good deal. They got a lesser deal than what the Giants paid for Daniel Jones on a quarterback that played well for him last year. I'm not in love with Baker, but Baker didn't take all the money. I mean, Baker, took a good deal, got himself in there. So, yeah, I think you have to say the Falcons are the best team because if they can improve defensively, they were good last year defensively. If they can continue with Raheem defensively, and, they still have all their draft picks, so they can add more talent. They got to get defensive linemen badly on their team. They got to get a pass rusher badly on their team. But for the most part, you got to think they are the best of the South.
Yeah, and that's something that we've said earlier this offseason. We said if they can get some stability at head coach and at quarterback, they will vault to being favorites in the NFC South, and they've done just that there with Kirk Cousins now going to be the QB1 for Atlanta. On the Minnesota side of things, though, we found out late last night or early this morning, depending on when you woke up or went to sleep, that they went ahead and signed Sam Darnold, which is something that we discussed earlier on the Lombardi line this week. And I think when we initially talked about it, I was a little skeptical. I was like, really, Darnold as a starter? Like maybe this is the backup. And who knows, maybe he ultimately is a mentor for a rookie quarterback. We'll get into that discussion as well. But I've warmed up a little bit to this Darnold thing here, just given the setup. Like I really like O'Connell as the coach. And as long as they keep Justin Jefferson, they have a lot of good receivers. The offensive line played all right. Maybe they can make this thing work here with Sam Darnold as the quarterback, at least as of right now before we enter the draft coming up next month.
Well, they got better on defense, too. They get
did.
Greenard from Houston, who's really a good player. They get Van Ginkel, who didn't get enough respect, and he's a good player. They got Blake Cashman from the Houston Texans to play inside linebacker. They're going to add more players to the draft. Look, I don't think it's all done. It's said and done for Minnesota. It's so fascinating how perception rules everything, right? Perception of Sam Darnold is a disaster. Perception of Justin Fields, an elite, right? There's this elite, I had a guy text me yesterday and wanted to trade a second-round pick to the Bears for Justin Fields. I'm like, you're completely off base here. You have no idea what you're talking about. Like, there's such a void between what the people who evaluate quarterbacks for a living and the fans think of Fields. There's a huge void. And the same thing with Darnold. Look, I'm not saying Darnold's a great player, but Darnold can be no different than Baker Mayfield. I mean, he can be no different than Baker Mayfield in terms of they just signed Aaron Jones this morning. Huge for them, right?
Yep.
They get a running back. Hawkinson's got to come back off his ACL. They got one of the best receivers in all of football. They got a really good quarterback coach as a head coach in Kevin O'Connell. So, look, I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think it's the bridge to get them to somewhere else. And they were tired of being in Kirk Cousins' jail. I mean, that's what they've been a prisoner to Cousins. I mean, and so they just said, fuck it, we're done with that. And I think you got to give them credit for trying to do that. Will they win the North? I don't know. I think Green Bay's really improved themselves. As Big Daddy will say, we'll see. But I think, that obviously Green Bay adds Josh Jacobs, which is huge. I think Josh Jacobs can do more things in the passing game than people think he can. I think that certainly will help him. It gives him a power back. It gives them the combination of Dillon and Jones in one player, so they don't have to substitute to get what they want to do. And with all their young receivers, they've got a really good chance. And then they've added to their defense. So, I think it's going to be the North is going to be really interesting. And Chicago still is, they're going to draft Caleb Williams, and there's no market for Justin Fields right now.
Who do you think is better right now, the Vikings or the Bears?
Oh, that's a good call. I think right now the Vikings would be better because the Vikings have some continuity offensively with Kevin. I think Darnold had played for this system. Look, I'm not saying Darnold's elite, but Darnold isn't like just a complete throwaway. I mean, this isn't like you're putting Nick Mullins out there or you're putting C.J. Beathard out there or you're putting somebody that can't, can win a game. I mean, he's not perfect. He's got his faults. But I think, to me, what good coaches will do is they'll try to eliminate all those problems. And I don't think he's their long-term answer, but for the short term, like Baker Mayfield was, he could maybe turn this thing around. And it gives them the cap room to help rebuild their defense, which they were unable to do. And they're not going to carry cap debt anymore. I think it's a huge thing for them. I really do. And they're not done. I mean, the Aaron Jones signing, I think, is huge if he can stay healthy.
Yep.
It gives them a loose play player in their backfield that certainly helps them. So they've got skill players. And I think that the way they played defense last year was impressive. And, I know they're going to lose. They'll probably lose Danielle Hunter. However, Grenard is a younger, good player.
Yeah, 100%. It's so fascinating because the betting market has the Chicago Bears 3-1 to win the division, the Vikings plus 650, so more than double the Vikings are right now, it gives you like that perception that you've talked about there with the perception of Sam Darnold once they lose Kirk Cousins. But at pick 11, where the Vikings currently sit right now, do you think that they will be active in pursuing a rookie quarterback, whether it's moving up in the draft or waiting for a guy to fall to them at 11?
Oh, I think they definitely will be. I think this is exactly what they wanted to do. They want to get a bridge and they want to get a rookie. And then they can rebuild around him, assuming they like a guy in the draft. Do they like Bo Nix, who's working out today? Do they like J.J. McCarthy? Who do they like? Do they like Michael Penix? I mean, they got a coach who can coach the quarterback, Kevin O'Connell. So that helps. That's the first step. And I think if you're, handicapping teams in the offseason, that's the one thing you look at. Can he make the quarterback play better? We saw Dave Canales get a head coaching job because he made Baker Mayfield play better, right? And I just think, to me, this gives them an opportunity to have more flexibility than ever before. I'm not sitting here saying they're going to win a Super Bowl, but I'm saying, like, it's not all doom and gloom because Kirk took the $180 million and went to Atlanta.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was telling my fiance that I was like, I'm kind of into this Vikings thing because she's a big Vikings fan, being from Minnesota, and she was like, I was just starting to warm up to Kirk Cousins, and now he's leaving. I was like, just don't throw all your stock away. The Vikings might be a little bit more competitive than you think right now. I'm fascinated to see where their win total opens up a little bit later on this month here when we get closer to the NFL draft. We're just getting warmed up though on the GM Shuffle. We'll get into some of the other quarterback moves. Mr. Unlimited now in Pittsburgh, Minshew in Vegas. We'll discuss it all next here on the other side.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
I guess allow us to give the mea culpa to Russell Wilson here. We didn't think that he would go to Pittsburgh and go into that situation and compete for a starting job, but here he is, Russell Wilson agreeing to sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers on a $1.2 million deal. Obviously, a vast majority of that money will be coming from the Denver Broncos. Yeah, pretty much all of it will be from Denver. But were you surprised to see Russell go ahead and agree with the Pittsburgh Steelers here, where he's going to compete with Kenny Pickett for that QB1 job?
I think the quarterback, as I've said oftentimes, is their musical chairs, right? So once a seat gets filled, there's no other seats. And so if he wanted to come in and compete, obviously the Raiders knew they were going to sign Gardner Minshew. Okay. Mm-hmm. So Russell knew that when he was visiting Pittsburgh, because the Raiders made no attempt to bring him in. Right. And so if he would have signed with the Giants, and the Giants, I think, were interested, because I'm not sure Daniel Jones is 100% healthy. I think it's kind of behind schedule on that. So I think ultimately there rally was, but I think Russell probably knew that if Daniel Jones was healthy, he wouldn't be the starter there, where the only open competition clearly was going to be Pittsburgh. Minnesota was locked in on Sam Darnold. Denver was trying to get Sam Darnold too, but they couldn't pull that off. So again, musical chairs. Where do I end up? I better take someplace where I can get a full-time gig. And I think that's what he did. And I think, look, it's not going to move the needle. I think ultimately it's a good spot. But here's what I would say. If if Kenny Pickett can't beat out Russell Wilson, he's not an NFL starter. And if Russell Wilson can't beat out Kenny Pickett, he's not an NFL starter. So we're going to see how this works out. Look, I would tell Pickett, look, this is your opportunity. Just because he's won a Super Bowl, just because he's been an All-Pro, doesn't mean you can't beat him out. I think this is exactly what Mike Tomlin wanted. I think he's got a chance to have competition in his room. Will they re-sign Mason Rudolph? Based on this deal that they gave Wilson, there's plenty of money to sign Mason Rudolph. So they could have three guys competing. And look, the one thing I do know, when you have three, you probably don't have any, but at least you have competition in the room, and people will value that competition, and maybe you could trade a guy down the road.
Do you think he's a good fit here for this Arthur Smith offense? And I guess with what the Steelers are doing, because one thing we discussed was that Russell has to kind of humble himself from what he's been in the years past, especially when he first arrived in Denver. He was the guy. He was headed to the Hall of Fame, but it's been a humbling 2 seasons. Do you think that this is a good fit for that culture, what Mike Tomlin has built over the last 15-plus years in Pittsburgh?
Well, I think, he's going to have to fit in the culture, not they're going to have the Russell Wilson. I think that was the conversation Tomlin had with them. Look, you come in here, get rid of your bodyguards, get rid of all this crap. It's football. It's all what it is, so you're going to have to focus, and you're going to have to endear yourself to the locker room. We're not a diva program. And I think that's ultimately what Russell has to do, is humble himself. That's going to be the key, right? He's got to humble himself to become the kind of player he wants to become.
So the Raiders were a team also in the quarterback market, and they went ahead and signed Gardner Minshew to a 2-year, $25 million contract. This was about 3 minutes. It was 3 minutes after the Athletics' Vic Tafur talked about how there has been some rumblings about maybe trading for Justin Fields, and all of a sudden, boom, Minshew now in Las Vegas is the Raiders quarterback.
Why does nobody believe what I say when it comes to the inner workings of the NFL? People that are on the outside have no clue. I said this a month ago. Luke Getsy was going to get phone calls, right? If the Raiders aren't interested in Fields, the rest of the National Football League will see this, right? The Raiders made a very clear statement. Gardner Minshew was their guy. Okay, that was very clear. They did. Mm-hmm. They gave him what, $15 million guaranteed money. So on a one, and so that's pretty clear that that's your guy. And they can pretend, well, we like Aiden O'Connell, we really like Justin Fields. No, the actions speak louder than any of the words. And the Raiders made it very clear they valued Gardner Minshew over Fields. And the rest of the National Football League isn't stupid. This gap of people that have this opinion of Fields is remarkable, Femi. It's just remarkable. I mean, this time last year, we had the worldwide leaders talking about him going to have an MVP season. I've never seen more delusional evaluations of a player in all my life. I kept saying all year, they got to trade for they got to draft a quarterback. Oh no, they got to keep Fields and trade the pick, move down. Now, what could they get for him, right? I mean, Mac Jones went for a 6th. Mm-hmm. Right? Mac Jones has won 18 games. I don't think Mac Jones is any good. I was wrong on Mac Jones' evaluation coming out. I thought he would be a better decision maker. I thought he would be methodical. All those things, wrong. Same thing with Fields. Everybody keeps trying to say, what offense? Cam Newton played right away, dominated, right? Jalen Hurts, he played in the second year, boom. Right? I mean, C.J. Stroud, boom, played right away. What are we waiting here for? What are we waiting? And so look at Jordan Love's progression from the time the season started to the end. Nobody's going to give him a starting quarterback job and say, you're the guy. Nobody's going to do it. He's going to have to go somewhere. And I'm starting to read it on Twitter now. I start to see some other people say, well, maybe he should go to Philadelphia, or maybe he should go here. Yeah, maybe he should. That's what I said a week ago.
Yeah, thanks for listening to the pod, everyone out there.
I mean, nobody's going to hand him a job. And so, I don't understand. It's just such a disconnect of the people that can evaluate for a living, that watch and what value goes into it, as opposed to the people that just make opinions on television with no real evidence behind it. Oh, he's going to be an MVP candidate next year. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Where do you think he ends up? Do you think it's a situation like Philadelphia? Is it the Giants, who maybe were looking at Russell Wilson, brought him in for a visit? Is there anywhere that you think would make sense for him in that QB2 role, or maybe a role to where he could compete for a starting job?
Well, there's no who's he going to compete with. I mean, New York, he certainly compete with Daniel Jones, but now you're talking about two different offenses, right? Mm-hmm. Daniel Jones, for him to be successful, it's rhythm, 3-step, boom, get the ball out, right? Where can he go? I think he's going to have to settle, come to Philadelphia. Philly made it very clear with the signing of Saquon Barkley. See, I think ultimately the signings of players that tell you about the team. Philly, and I tweeted this yesterday when I heard he was signing in Philadelphia, and I tweeted it Still unsure because Philly has never gone down the running back road, right? We know that. They've never paid for a back. But I think where Philly got to the point was, and I can't prove this, but just watching tape I can, Philly said to themselves, look, we won 2 years ago by running the football. We have the best third and short yard offense in football. If we get the 3rd and 1, we're going to convert. If we get, we're going to push. So, we've got to have a blue chip player behind Hurts to set up his play action pass game, to set up all the things, to use the 6-back offense. And I think they said, okay, look, we tried to do it with pieces, but no more pieces. We're going to try to get a blue chip player to come in and do that. Now, can Barkley stay healthy? That remains to be seen. He's been durable over the last 2 years. He's missed some games. But that's what, to me, the Barkley signing going against the Eagle grain was more about we have to give Hurts these things that he can make him a better player. They're protecting their investment in Hurts by signing Barkley.
Yeah, and they signed him to a 3-year, $37.75 million deal there. So all these guys that were on the open market, they wanted to see what was going to happen. Saquon Barkley signs a pretty nice contract there with the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles kind of breaking character from what they've done in the past in signing a running back. But I do want to get back to the Las Vegas Raiders, though, because the Minshew signing I think is interesting because it's 2 years, $25 million. But when I look at the surface, I think I'd rather do what New England did, a 1-year, $8 million deal for Jacoby Brissett, because I don't really see a difference between Minshew and Jacoby Brissett, despite what maybe the perception is there. Isn't that what would you have rather done? Would you rather have Brissett 1 year, $8 million, or Minshew 2 years, $25?
I think I'd rather have Brissett 1 year. I think Brissett's a great leader. I think to me, this is New England should have signed Brissett this time last year. Things would have been maybe different in New England. But that being said, I think to me, I'd rather have Brissett on a 1-year deal. But this tells you, I think what this tells you about the Minshew deal is the Raiders may not be desperate to trade up or give away their whole draft or do something stupid like the Panthers did to get Bryce Young. So it protects them in the sense, okay, we've got a young quarterback in Aiden O'Connell. We got Minshew. It's not perfect, but we'll see what happens. If we can get a quarterback, great, but at least we know we have it out. We can put together a team. Remember, when you're building a team, and Parcells was big on this, Sean Payton talked about it at the Combine. I wrote about it in a column for VSiN this week about, you have must needs, you have want, you have must needs, want, you have, and so then you have must, want, need. You must get this, you need this, you want that. Want is kind of like luxury. You kind of want, we need to improve the depth of this, or we need that. But must, if we don't get this, we can't function as a football team. And the Raiders, by signing Minshew, can function as a football team. Now, the Wilkins signing, I think, is exactly what you have to do. You build strength on strength, right? You go and get him. Like all the things that Jacksonville's done in free agency, I would have traded all those guys to sign Wilkins for them. Duvernay, Cam Davis, all these receivers they get, right? Mitch Morse. Like they need a stud defensive tackle. I would have signed Wilkins and paid him whatever, and then I would have tried to pick and choose some of these other positions. Because when I look at Jacksonville, I see them collect a lot of guys. I'm not sure that it's all going to go towards winning. I'm not sure it's all going to make them better. Gabe Davis, will that help with Zay Jones? And, will Duvernay help with all that? Yeah, I mean, they're good players. Does it move them like a blue chip tackle to go with Josh Allen? That makes you a better team.
Yeah, to me, it felt like Jacksonville was more so shuffling papers yesterday than doing anything that was more impactful to winning. Christian Wilkins signs with the Raiders 4 years, $110 million. Now you have him on that defensive line with Max Crosby, who's one of the best edge rushers in all of the NFL. You have Malcolm Kuntz, who was coming on late last year. Maybe you can get Tyree Wilson to get going. Maybe that year 2 bump for Tyree Wilson can kick in. Then all of a sudden you have a defensive line that's really cooking with some gas if you're the Las Vegas Raiders in a division where you're going to have to get to the quarterback. You got Mahomes, you got Herbert in there. You got to get those guys on the ground if you want any chance to beat them. But I still look at the quarterback position where they're picking 13th in the draft. If they can't get a rookie guy, it's hard for me to get excited about Minshew being your starting quarterback. Like, you can talk about the Mahomes rules and all that stuff, but if this is your QB1 that you're going to war with, I mean, throw that all out the window. What are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't disagree with you. I think there's times where Minshew, the longer he plays, the less effective he becomes. Like, he's a middle reliever to me.
Yep.
And I think that's probably what you're going to see. Well, but it gets them a chance to operate. Look, they're going to need to get a quarterback, but obviously they valued Minshew. a hell of a lot better than Fields, and the guy who's the offensive coordinator had Fields.
Yeah, money talks. And they gave the money to Gardner Minshew. That does it for us here on the DK Network. We're going to continue, though, for our podcast audience. Still a lot to get to unpack from the tampering period here in free agency.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
Well, we saw a blockbuster trade, Michael, between the Carolina Panthers and the New York Giants. The Giants sending over a second and a fifth for the Pro Bowl pass rusher and edge rusher Brian Burns. Brian Burns then signing the 5-year, $150 million contract with the New York Giants. So he gets the extension that he's been looking for the past couple of years. And Carolina, you alluded it to earlier in the pod, they had a chance to get 2 first-round picks a couple years ago at the deadline from the Rams for Brian Burns. They turned that down, and now they only get a second and a fifth here for a roster that's at least devoid of any sort of talent that we see on that side of the football.
I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, I think there's I think there's a lot of malpractice going on in Carolina. Like, I don't know what the plan is. Like, I can't. Clearly, people could say, well, they signed 2 big guards to help, Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt. That helps the inside of their pocket. Great. Okay, great. They trade away a pass rusher, a guy that they could have had. They traded all these draft picks. Dante Jackson they signed when Dan Morgan was there. Bradley Bozeman they signed when Morgan was there. Von Bell they signed last year. They cut all those guys. I mean, they lose Frankie Luva, who's one of their better players. Like, I don't get it. Like, I don't know what the plan is. I don't understand you trade away a pass rusher for a 2 and a 5. You could just let him play for a year, keep him on the thing, and, maybe you could end up getting something more for him. But at the end of the day, you've traded away a receiver and DJ Moore. You traded the first pick in the draft, Caleb Williams, perhaps. You traded all this stuff for Bryce Young. Like, who's making these decisions? Like, who has a plan? I'm reading this book about Jeff Bezos, and Bezos is always in these meetings that they have at Amazon. He's talking constantly about where's the second door? Where can we get out of trouble? Like, for a team that's run by a billionaire hedge fund guy who's used to making decisions, like, does anybody ask, like, what's the implications if we do this? What's the implications if we do, like, where's the plan? It seems like every day the plan changes. It's something new. It's like you're playing the national anthem every day. Okay, we're going to try this today. Like, seriously? Like, when you build an organization, you build it from the top down with a philosophy. Okay, here's what we're doing. Here's how we want to do it. Everybody buys in. You have a culture. Here are the 14 principles of what we have, like Amazon does. And then we're going to move forward. We're going to make mistakes. Absolutely. But look, look, Dan Morgan, I don't understand it. Dan Morgan was there with Scott Federer. Now all of a sudden he's got a better vision for the team. Where was his vision when he was there? I keep asking that question. Nobody answers that, and so I don't know. Like, I don't get it. I don't understand it. I feel bad for Canales. He's going to have to make it work. We'll see if he can.
Yeah, it's a good thing he signed that 6-year contract because that's going to be tough hill to climb there. Carolina turning that team around. For Dan Morgan, yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like you said, like, where was this? Because he was a part of it. It's like, I guess he was keeping the plans under wrap or something like that. He was keeping the secrets for his time to shine.
Like, I didn't want to. He agreed at the time, but I didn't really want to do it. All you need to do is, if you really want to know the NFL, is watch Ryan Pace when he asked everybody, should we draft Mitchell Trubisky? And everybody in the room says, we've got complete agreement. No, you don't. There were people in that room that didn't want to draft him, but they didn't say it, right? That's the difference between loyalty and devotion. Devotion, you just say what people want you to say. The loyalty is saying that you don't agree. You don't agree. This is wrong. This is the dumb thing to do. And, but look, I don't think, one thing about Carolina, I don't think you have to worry about them. I don't think they're making very good decisions moving forward, but that's just the initial reaction to what they're doing. And we'll see how it moves. I mean, they once had a good defense, they had Derek Brown, they had Burns, they had Gross Matos, they had Luva. They could run, they could hit. Dante Jackson, I'm not saying he was a great player. I think the pass regime signed him, but the part is like they keep losing guys, and you don't see them. They don't have a good young team. Are they going to draft better? We'll see.
Yeah, well, they don't have a first-round pick. That was given up in the Bryce Young trade, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult. And even a guy like J.C. Horn, who we like, he can't stay on the field. So it's
Can't
tough.
stay on the field.
It's tough to stay optimistic about this Panthers team. On the Giants side of it, though, can Brian Burns live up to this contract? Because I like Brian Burns a lot as a pass rusher, and I think that adds to their front with Burns. You got Thibodeau, who was starting to come on a little bit last season. Dexter Lawrence is awesome on the interior. That defensive front can be really formidable if they're all playing at a high level.
Well, look, a lot of it's going to be he's going to have to play with the lead, right? And I think the way the Giants have approached things now is the Giants are going to be a four-man rush team, try to get pressure on without having to blitz, and use Burns' ability to rush off the corner. Look, I think Burns is a good player. I do. I think Burns is a good player. Do I think Burns is an elite rusher? He's had 46 sacks in his career. He's had 95 quarterback hits. I think he's a good player. Do I think he's a blue chip? No. Do I think he's a red chip? In that situation, is Bryce Huff and who's better, Bryce Huff or Brian Burns? Well, coming off the edge, Bryce Huff brings a little bit more heat. But the way the Giants want to play, they want to rush forward. They're going to need another guy to help them inside that can push the pocket. He got 8 sacks for Carolina last year. I'm not sure. He's had double-digit sacks one time in his career. Look, I think it's a lot of money, but they only paid a 2 and a 5 for the guy. They paid a lot of money more in the contract than they paid for the player in terms of the value. So, he's 25 years old. He's young. He can improve his game. He's had 2 good seasons in 21 and 22. Is he in TJ Watt's category? No. Is he a good player? Yeah, I think he is a good player, but once again, they didn't really. I think getting him for a 2 and a 5 was a good deal for the Giants. I really do.
Yeah, no, I think it was a solid deal for the New York Giants. They also signed John Runyon on the offensive line to try to shore up that old line. But it all comes back to the quarterback position. Whether Daniel Jones is healthy or not healthy, they got to get that thing fixed if they want to be competitive in the NFC. We saw the Super Bowl champions retain their stud up front, Chris Jones, 5 years, $158.7 million, $101 million guaranteed. The question that we asked over the weekend when this news broke was, why didn't we just do this last year? I guess maybe the salary cap going up, but Chris Jones is staying back with the champs, though.
I think clearly the cap has made people like the Eagles re-sign Landon Dickens for a contract. I think you're going to start the Colts are using their cap room to re-sign their players, right? So I think a lot of that extra cap room that people think we're going to free agents, the free agent market hasn't been going up on that direction like we thought it would. And I think ultimately people are saving that money for their younger players and see how that works out. And I think ultimately Chris Jones got rewarded. They need him inside. He's a big part of what they do, and now they've lost some, they lost Allegretti to the Washington, the Commanders. He was the backup. Remember, he came in for Tooney when Tooney was hurt, and he got paid. And so, look, the one thing about the Chiefs will be, this is today, tomorrow, this is where the economic deals start to come in a little bit. Maybe, there's a few more guys who are going to get paid. But once the wave's over, that's why when we come back on Thursday, everything will be pretty much situated. We can really kind of get a handle on teams. Like, I think the Rams started out really good. They re-signed Dotson. They paid Jackson, right? And they got a tight end to help them, which is what they need. And they're moving in that right direction. Now they have a first-round pick. So they got a chance. Seattle has lost everybody. They signed Leonard Williams. So we'll see where that goes, where they're going to, obviously, Schneider's going to start to add players to the team. But it's sometimes just being in this market doesn't necessarily mean you're being productive. You're overpaying for players. And the talent of a guy is when you bring the value of the player in. Remember, Burns is going to help the Giants. There's no question. Is he going to live to that contract? Boy, I think that they paid a hell of a price. But they needed him, right?
Yeah.
And it's a 2-year deal, basically. It's basically a 3-year deal. And so even though it listed 5 years, he's got an out at 2027. So I think ultimately, they paid a lot of money for him, and he's going to have to deliver after 3 years. If he doesn't when he's 28, they'll make a move.
The Green Bay Packers, they signed Xavier McKinney at safety from the New York Giants. Packers looking to improve their safety position, but the running back position is where things got interesting. Do you think that they upgraded, downgraded, they stay the same with cutting Aaron Jones and signing Josh Jacobs 4 years, $48 million from the Raiders?
Well, I think the way they did the Josh Jacobs contract, it almost is like a 1-year contract that every year well, it is a 1-year contract. He has a potential out after 2025. So it's a 1-year, $14.8 million deal. And so he can get out of it. He'll leave behind some dead cap money if he does, $9.3 million if he does that. So, it's interesting how they did this deal. Now they can continue to work on it, but I think they've dangled the carrot in front of them. Look, Jacobs is the combination of Dillon and Jones. He can run with power. He can catch the ball in the backfield. He's got a lot of wear and tear on his body. Hopefully he'll be fresher, and I think that he can be a huge part of what they do offensively with those young skill players that they have. But it's interesting. They did a 1-year deal after they just redid Aaron Jones's deal last year. So they obviously feel this is a huge upgrade for them there. And I like Josh Jacobs. It's surprising that the Raiders, who were talking about signing him, they paid him $14 million last year. They didn't bring him back because he got 14.8 in 1 year. He got more than a franchise number he would have gotten. So that's how they got that done, and he's there. I think the Packers have a chance to be really good, and I think he helps them tremendously. I think he gives them that combination. Because when we saw Aaron Jones play the last half of the season, they were a different offensive team.
Well, we'll see, as Big Daddy likes to say.
Big Daddy, I haven't talked to him. I'm going to call him. I have to go to New York here in 2 minutes, but I'll talk to him. I'll find out exactly what he and Goot were talking about as they were making all these moves. Yes, I'll find out.
It's a young roster, so we'll get Big Daddy's thoughts on Thursday with the Green Bay Packers. Other running back signings, while Austin Eckler go to the Commanders, Tony Pollard from the Cowboys to the Titans, DeAndre Swift from the Eagles to the Bears. That was like the first free agent signing. And then Devin Singletary to the Giants, Gus Edwards to the Chargers, and Antonio Gibson to the Patriots, as well as Aaron Jones earlier this morning to the Minnesota Vikings. So we've seen this running back renaissance. These guys flying off of the board. Does that mean the teams are falling out of love with the rookies that are coming out in this draft, or they thought that these were just good deals?
I think it's good deals. I don't know about, I think Pollard's a good player. I worried he wasn't the same player. You saw him all year too. He's not the same guy. Eckler Eckler didn't get a very good deal from Washington. So, I think to me, the market kind of was variable. I think Gus Edwards, what they've done in the Chargers is very Jim Harbaugh. They get a running back. They get Dissy to be the on the line blocking tight end. They're going to run the football. You can see that. So, yeah, I think these are good deals. You just worry like Swift. This is 2 teams now that have had Swift that let Swift go. I like Swift. You watch Swift on tape, but why did Detroit replace him with Gibbs? Why did Philly replace him with Barkley? They could have had him for a cheaper number, but they didn't. So you kind of always wonder about that. When you're the third team in a row that has a guy, do you really know the guy? That's what makes you worry. From the outside looking at Swift I think he's great. But, to me, why did now you could say, well, they got Barkley. But Philly's never been that way. Yeah. Barkley's had Swift had good games for Philly. I think a lot of it is maybe he just can't play the whole year. That's what I think.
Yeah, durability has always been a concern. That was one of the reasons why Detroit moved on from him a couple of years ago, and then now we've seen Philly doing the same thing here. So for the Chicago Bears, they have a lot of cap space. I expected them to be a little bit more active. Now there's still time. Daniil Hunter's still out there on the market. We'll see what he ends up going to over these next couple of days. But, of course, we will wrap it all up on Thursday. A little bit shorter of a pod here today because, Michael, like you said, you have to run to New York City. But, man, we could have done this for about 2-3 hours. I feel alive.
Marcus Mariota just signed with the Commanders, so the Eagles are looking for a backup quarterback.
Could it be? Could it be our guy? Could it be our guy? We'll see what happens in the city of brotherly love. But that does it for this edition of the GM Shuffle. Thank you to our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos as always. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If we didn't hit it, we'll make sure to hit it on Thursday once the new league year begins on Wednesday with our original Thursday podcast in our usual time slot. We'll break it all down. NFL free agency, we're back, baby. We are back. Transactions are happening, tampering period, and maybe the Cowboys will wake up from their Cabo vacation. We'll see what happens between now and then. But Michael, enjoy New York City. I will talk to you on Thursday.
Thank you.